Hello everybody, my name's TankRunner. Welcome back to the channel. This is my first YouTube stream. Normally I'm over on Twitch, but today we're doing something a little bit different and I felt like it fit the YouTube platform a little bit better. Plus a lot of people who watch my stuff really wanted the streams to be going on YouTube. Makes it a little bit easier for people to catch. We've got some people coming in. Hey guys, how's it going? Thanks for coming in, checking out this stream. So for those of you who are watching on YouTube after the fact, after the stream is completely done, this video is specifically a world building class, sort of, where I want to talk to everybody about how to world build and how to create your own world, whether that be for a book, or a video game, or a D&D campaign, whatever you need a custom world for. I'd like to try and help you by either A, giving you ideas about the ways that I do world building, or a sort of Q&A style setup where you guys can come in here and talk to me about the different worlds that you're working on, or any snags you guys might be catching yourselves on while trying to build a world. So I've got a few things planned for today. It's going to be a little bit more loosey-goosey compared to my other videos, obviously, because we're doing it live. So there's probably going to be a little bit more dead air every once in a while, a few more and probably more and likes than I would prefer. But we're going to go ahead and get started then. So I've been talking to everybody in the Discord for a few different ideas of what to do with the stream, and we've come up with a few things. So today, at some point, we would like to try and make a custom world together. Everybody in this stream, anyone who's watching or can join into the live chat, will be able to help us create our own custom world. But we're going to go ahead and save that for after we've gone over a few different things about how I make my own worlds, and you guys can chime in as well on different ways that you guys go about it. Another thing that we want to do is I'm going to be showing you guys a few different worlds that I've worked on, so then it's not just me giving examples. I can actually show you how I actually take the things that I'm telling you work for me and showing you how it actually works. Yeah, someone count all the random sounds that I make. I expect some kind of secondary video released by someone that's just an edited of just, it's just like 20 minutes of me going, okay, there's another one. I did it immediately. Alright, so first off, I want to ask everybody who's in the live chat where they would like to start. I can bring up some of the worlds that I've worked on and kind of show off the material that I have. So let's see, I can do that. Let me bring up one of my Word documents that has a bunch of information about some of my worlds. I want to start with the small stuff. I don't want to scare you guys away with super in-depth things like Excel sheets for world economies and different stuff like that. Let's start with something simple. I will bring up some images. So let me find the files on my computer here. There should be an image somewhere of Oh, this is perfect. Okay, so So we're going to start here. So this image here is a world that I created specifically for a D&D campaign that I'm doing, / also it's involved in my sword fighting unit that I have in real life. So in this situation, just to start from scratch, because you guys probably don't know this about me, I am one of the leaders of a sword fighting unit, and we've done a bunch of different games as this club, but the primary one that we're doing as of right now is called Hearthlight. But generally, the unit that we have is a lot of full contact, large numbers, sort of like battle reenactment, but it's all, like I said, full contact. And all of the gear and weaponry that we use is fairly safe. A lot of it is made with like fiberglass cores with protective padding around it. That being said, people obviously still get hurt, but we do everything that we can to keep everything safe for everybody. Hearthlight we started doing more recently, and there's a little bit more, it's a little bit more roleplay heavy compared to some of the other ones that we've done. We've done Darkon, we've done Dagger here, but here's the thing, right? Hearthlight is a little bit more heavy on the roleplay. So we decided that our sword fighting unit, which is called the Moonlight Sentinels, would lean a little bit harder into the roleplay aspect, and try and bring a little bit more of the canon and the bigger world, and try and add like an overarching story for everybody. So this map here I created of the general area in which the game of Hearthlight takes place. And I made it basically from scratch. I used a program called Hexographer. There's a 1 and a 2. I can't remember which one I used. But that allowed me to make all of these individual hexes. But then I made a very small version and then just opened those files into Photoshop and made this much larger hex. This map might not look it, but this is about 6 pieces of paper, so like 8.5 by 11s, like 6 of them tiled, 3 across on the top and then 3 across on the bottom. So it's a very large map. And then each of the colored rings is the border of a specific country or another unit. So these are all of the people that we either have an alliance with as a unit or that we've met on our travels while going to all of these Hearthlight events and battling sometimes up to like 300 people at a time. Obviously, those numbers have gone down a little bit since the world sort of shut off for like the last 2 years. But things are starting to pick back up. So after winter, we're going to be getting back into it. But here is a perfect setup for what we've done. So one country is formed like a ring. Yeah, okay, so we're going to go over that. So in the top left corner, there is a red ring. And as you can see, that's different than all the other countries and units that we have here, because all the other ones are basically a circle, but they have made a ring, which means the things inside that inner line do not belong to them. As you can see, there are some blue hexes inside of that ring that is owned by somebody else. So the idea is for their unit, they are more of a nomadic group. They don't stick to one specific location for very long, and they don't build structures very often. When they do, they're very important. So this unit does not own this giant circle. They only own the ring itself, everything between those 2 red lines, because they're constantly traveling that line because that's protecting their quote-unquote borders. But borders is very loosely described for them. Yes, like religious objects, things like that. Very specific, like religious, important artifacts, fortresses. Yeah, exactly. You got it. So the inside of the ring denotes the land that they that they believe they sort of deserve, or I don't want to say like manifest destiny, but it's sort of very adjacent to that. The idea is like, this is our territory. We don't own anything here, but if you come onto this land, we may or may not consider that aggressive. So in that situation, those people in the blue hexes are being really shitty, at least by the definition of the red team there. They're very upset. Yeah, it's sort of like Destined Land. They call it theirs, but it's also not theirs because they technically don't own it. They just protect it. Yeah, it's a no-go zone. Those are their no-no squares, and they don't want anyone else to go on them without some kind of permission. So people who are allied with them or are friendly with them will go and talk to them and see, like, hey, is it okay if we come onto your land? We need, we were chasing a herd or something, and it went into your territory, and we really need the food before winter hits, so is it cool if we come in? And depending on how they think about you, they will say yes or no. But yeah, that's what's going on with the red ring there. And then we have a few other things here, like I have denoted the white is where it snows very often. We have images of like little trees to denote forest. The water area, the like light blue, that's for lakes and rivers. We've got the dark blue for the ocean. Let's see. There is a dark green for normal forest, and then there is like a greenish blue forest, which denotes swamp. So smack dab in the middle of the map, you can see there's a brown ring there. They actually have... oh, yeah, sure, I'll just... So right here, we've got the swamp. Then we have the darker brown area is mountains. We've got a lighter brown denotes snowy peaks, or like the tops of the mountains. We've got these dark green areas here for hilly wooded areas, and then we have these like off green colors for, those are basically like plains and like rolling hills and things like that. A badlands sort of situation. So this is normally where I start. I will build a world map. You don't have to put anything on it. You don't have to plan anything. You don't need to know the people who live where. You don't even really need to know where like forests and lakes and rivers are. Just get a general shape and idea of the world that you want to build. So in this situation, this is basically random. I have created this map before I put anything on it, just as a general shape. I did take a few ideas of the general area that we live in real life. So inside that red ring here, we've got these three rivers that connect together. That's a pretty big... It's a pretty big factor in our real life area, at least down here towards the south, which I guess is another important thing. South is down this way, and north is up on this side, just because the map was a little bit more... I didn't want like a long map, so I just turned it slightly, that's all. Are those people groups defined by the geography of their settlements? It really depends. Like, the people who live in the swamp, yes. The unit that holds that spot is called Mirkwood, which is basically just a bunch of people who live in the swamp. Or are there's some orcs and stuff that live there. People that generally want to just be left to their own devices and don't want to interact with a lot of other people. sounds like a good place to start. Then you can decide like how a village culture may be affected by their surroundings. Yes, exactly. So back to what I was saying. You just want to create a world, a general shape. So in this situation, I created this using some ideas of just taking different things from real life and sort of twisting it into a cool medieval map. So in a different situation, let me bring up my first D&D world map. So give me a second to find that. Sorry guys, I'm just looking for a file here. Yeah, so the image that I'm looking for is specifically a D&D, the D&D setting from my my D&D Pantheon videos. Where the hell? Alright, give me a second. I'm going to plug in one of my hard drives because I think it might be in there. So while I'm doing that, I'm going to go ahead and just look at the stream really quickly and see what you guys have been saying in the chat because I kind of wasn't looking there for a second. Are there centaurs in the world? Not in this world. I mean, there could be, but in this world specifically, this is for a sword fighting unit in real life. And some of the events that we go to are roleplay heavy, so we created this to sort of lean into that, because sometimes we'll go to an event and it's just to fight. It's just to go onto a big field and fight like 300 people at a time and, you know, get some exercise, get out some unwanted aggression. It's fun. It's fun to do. It takes a lot of practice, so we practice basically every week. But so in this world, it would be like someone could be a centaur, but they would have to go through the effort to basically do a like going to like a con. Like they would have to specifically create a whole costume to make themselves look like a centaur. So it would be pretty difficult to do. But hey, I've got a satyr in my unit. That's Ark, for those of you in the Discord. He's got a whole satyr kit. The whole bottom half of his body is giant furry goat legs. So, like, it is possible. And he's got, like, giant horns and stuff. So that's really cool. And then also, people will dress up like elves. I talked about orcs earlier. So it's totally possible to be something other than... what the hell is going on? I'm so sorry, everybody. I'm looking for a folder. And this is not my hard drive. What the fuck is happening? Sorry for that sound, if that was a little loud. There's another one. Let me back up real quick. I'm going through the questions again. You should put something up by the giant lake. Yeah, so the idea is the map has a lot of open negative space, so then when more units are told about the map, they can sort of pick the location that they want to put their unit in. So the map was made very large under the pretense that it is going to grow and more people are going to be added to the map as we go. D&D campaign folder, there it is. D&D world building, D&D map. Jesus Christ, it's not... Why am I like this, everyone? These folders are chaos. Oh my goodness. Okay. I found it. Okay. So you guys go ahead and take a look at that for a minute. It might be really small and hard for you to see, so I'll have to zoom in on specific details as we move on. But I want to cover some of the people that are talking in the chat, because I have been ignoring you a little bit. So I was just talking about centaurs, because Centaur Guy's here. If you guys are from the Discord, Centaur Guy is here. So I needed to address him. That was important. Okay, yes, there are centaurs in the world. Talked about that. Yes, the original image that I was showing you, or no, this image right here that I'm showing on screen right now is the D&D setting from my D&D Pantheon videos. So this is the world where all of that takes place. I'm taking too long. Everyone's going to riot. I got it. You should put something in the... Yep, talked about the lake. Just thought of something. Each settlement of different biomes worship a different god. Yeah, we'll get into that. Listen, gods is a very good place to start after you've built your landmass, but it can get really messy really quickly. So we're going to talk about that in detail. Don't let me forget to talk about how to incorporate gods and such. Okay, so I have not seen Hawkeye, so no spoilers, but I have heard that the sort of LARP scene it's not like completely 100% accurate. So here's the thing, right? We're going to cover this real quick. I know this has nothing to do with what this video is supposed to be about. Our unit doesn't necessarily LARP. But we do go to different groups that do LARP. So our unit isn't connected to any one specific battle game or whatever. We do a lot of just sword fighting, which is fun. Obviously, that's why we do it. So, like I said, it's basically like you build a kit, and it's all safe, but... it's still dangerous. You're still coming in full contact with other people. There are grappling, you can tackle, you can kick certain people in certain areas, depending. So LARPing, we are adjacent to that, obviously, and we do partake in LARP, yes. So, there's different groups, right? So like I said, each game is slightly different. Darkon, that's very heavy. In the role-playing aspect. But also, it's very gamey. There's a lot of, like, you can have skills, like in an MMO, that you can activate and use on other people, so it's less about your real-life skill. Then there's things like SCA, which is all 100% about your physical skill. Those guys fight with, like, wood and metal weapons, and they wear full-on metal gear, like full plate and stuff, and they just beat the shit out of each other. My unit doesn't do that very often because we have, like, jobs and lives and family and stuff, and we can't afford to just, like, call our boss, like, one day in advance and go, hey, man, I'm not going to be able to make it into work today. Some dickhead broke my arm while I was in, like, an arm bar while we were medieval fighting in the woods somewhere. That's not going to fly. So that's like SCA, but then there's like Darkon, which is like a little bit more safety, not a whole lot of LARP. It also recently came into a little bit of controversy, but we're not going to get into that. People in my area don't play that very often. Darkon in other areas that are outside of my area are way better, but in the area that I live, Darkon has kind of fallen through because of some bullshit. But we're not going to talk about that. Dagger here is a bit more of a... I just realized I might have said Darkon when I was talking about the controversy. It's Dagger here. It's just Dagger here. So Dagger here is less roleplay. but also less like SEA because it's like they use a lot of foam and stuff to pad things out to make things a little bit more safe. Then there's what we do now with Hearthlight, which has a little bit more role-playing aspects. There's some healing involved, which involve healing poems that so you memorize them, and they have to be a certain length, a certain amount of syllables, and you can find someone on the battlefield who is injured, and if you say the whole poem without getting hit, that person is recovered and is fine now. So yeah, it completely ranges, and I would think that any situation in which you are hitting someone with a foam weapon but also are role-playing at the same time, that's what I would consider a LARP. So you can see how it would be a little bit of a weird, like, gray area. It gets a little gray. Some people are upset when they get called LARPers, but whatever. If I had a chance to go to a LARP, I would totally do it. But, sorry, I'm getting way off track again. Let me find that question about the LARPing. Okay. Is it the real TankRunner, the one who does Pokemon? Yes. Oh my god, I don't know if you guys can hear that, but there's like a weather siren alarm going off. I don't know if you can hear that, but that's terrifying. What the fuck is happening outside? It's like a siren. I'm gonna scroll back down. Can you guys hear that? Okay, you guys can't hear it. Run! Yeah. No, that sound... That's terrifying. Okay, some of you guys can hear it, some of you can't. It's fine. I'm gonna keep going then. Apologies if you can in fact hear that. Some of you are saying that you can hear my PC. Is it really bad? I can change my setup a little bit and move a little bit further away. I'll move the microphone over just a little bit and see if that helps. Okay, so let me scroll back up because I want to cover all of the questions because this is also a Q&A for world building and stuff, so this is important. A lot of you guys making fun of me for not keeping track of my shit better on my computer. That's a heat map. Thank you. I'm glad you guys like the map here. How many peninsulas are there? Are we talking about this map that we're looking at right now? I think that's what you're referring to. I mean, there are several. You can look at it, but there's a lot. What's up with the Dorito Peninsula? That's called that's called Deritos, not not Doritos. Centaur God. So I think Centaur Guy's back. All right, so we talked about this a little bit in the Discord, having a Centaur God. If I was going to have a god that was a centaur, he would not necessarily be a centaur. He would be, like, we would look at him and we would go, that's a centaur. But to him, he's not a centaur. It's just maybe centaurs were made in his image, and we refer to half people, half horses as centaur. So in that situation, I wouldn't necessarily make that centaur god a warrior god. I would make him some kind of peace god or a nature god, something that has to do with the forest or something like that. Centaur normally are like that, but obviously there are different types of centaur, some of which stick to themselves and are very peaceful. Some of them hunt and will fight humans if they see them. And then there's other ones, like the ones from like Guild Wars 2 that are like on sight. They'll just fucking kill anything and everyone and are constantly attacking everybody. because of something that has happened in the past, or like maybe they don't like humans for whatever reason, what have you. Someone is asking me that they're telling me that I should watch Hawkeye. Maybe a little bit later in the stream when we take a little break, I will get into my issues with the Marvel Cinematic Universe as of right now. Didn't always used to be like that. I used to love Marvel, but recently, not so much. But we'll talk about that later. Let's see. No, yeah, so so people are asking about the SCA. Yeah, so they make swords out of wood and some metal. Still technically safe, but only if you're wearing, like, full plate. Otherwise, you are just getting hit in, like, your fleshy bits with just a giant club, basically. And it fucking hurts. Even with the armor, it can hurt pretty bad. But yeah, that's SCA for you. They're fucking crazy. But they also lean very heavily into, like, the medieval experience. Everything has to be period accurate. Everything they wear is accurate. Everything they do, the way they camp, is very medieval accurate. A lot of people talking about cats. You guys saying you can't hear the... Okay, good. All right, yeah. So I was just talking about the Centaur God. Doesn't that just make him the original Centaur? Yeah. Yes, he is a Centaur. He is, yeah, Missy Dupop. He is the Centaur. We look at him and would go, yeah, that's a Centaur. But I'm just saying, like, he most likely created the Centaur in his image. A Centaur God would be fitting for a nomadic culture, not just centaurs, but the general concept of moving, preserving nature, not taking more than you need. Yeah, exactly. How would their design go? Angelic? Honestly, I'm not sure. When we create our custom world towards the end of the stream, when we start working on making our own thing, I don't know, man. I think we try and have a centaur god. Like, why not? Let's do it. So many people are talking about the centaur idea. Let's chalk that off. We're gonna do that for sure. What's the best piece of world building you've done for this D&D setting? Something that you're most proud of or find most outstanding? Oh man, that's a really hard question. Maybe we'll talk about this a little bit, and talking about the world will give me an idea. Because that's really hard. I have standards for my world, and I'm very picky about what I put in my world. So I would say that generally I'm pretty proud of everything that's in this D&D setting, which I call ethos. But let's zoom in a little bit and talk about some of this in a little bit more detail, just to see if anything pops into my head. Okay, so this is the Obsidian Isles, which is right next to a place called the Boiling Sea. The idea is that there are a lot of underwater volcanic vents under the water, which doesn't make the water itself extremely hot. It is warm pretty much any time of the year, but it's not actually boiling. That's just in reference to how warm it is compared to other places. And that has sort of made an island of obsidian, because this whole area is basically like underwater vents that warm the water. And every once in a while, occasionally, you get bursts of actual lava, like cracking up through the rocks and hitting the water. And because of the water, it is colder than the lava, but it is not as much so as it would normally be, because of how warm the water is. So it actually sort of, over a long period of time, has created this island, or a grouping of islands, that's just made out of obsidian and other cooled rock. Yes, this is the map that my D&D Pantheon is for. Yes. Show us the kobolds. So the kobolds in my world do not... They're not a base race. They're not... they don't have, like, a home city that I can show you guys or anything like that. They are very much so very adjacent to, like, goblins. So kobolds can basically be found anywhere, but are in bigger numbers around mountains and different places like that. You also had an obsidian goddess. Is she related? So not quite. So the idea is, in my world, there's two different kinds of obsidian. There is normal, natural forming obsidian, and then there is obsidian that has been basically supercharged. There was an event that took place a few years ago, depending on when you're playing in my world, because we kind of jump all over the timeline a lot. But from where we're at right now, the furthest point forward in the timeline, it happened maybe 60 years ago, 60, 80 years ago. There was a massive fight, which, and everything that I say about my world has been played out by characters in my campaigns. So everything that is here on this map is here because it got put into a campaign where either I DM'd or a very close friend DM'd, and this is the world that we have created. All of the negative space is stuff that, like, campaigns haven't taken place in and hasn't been added to the map yet. So all the way up here is where one of the first campaigns took place in this world. And this mountain range here got invaded by creatures from the Underdark. They cracked a hole up into very, very low underground. They dug up from the underground up into a cave system that is underneath this mountain. The person who was leading this assault onto the surface was a man called Shazarthrak. Shazarthrak, it's vague because we didn't really talk to him very often in other ways other than basically, like, threats, because he's a very dangerous monster. But it was heavily implied that he was a drow who basically was able to push himself into godhood. Or at least he was a demigod. He was very close to reaching godhood. And he wanted to take what he believed was his, which is to say, the surface. Because up until that point, he basically controlled the Underdark, or at least the Underdark in my world. And he had done some things to himself to sort of push himself into demigodhood, different rituals and like turning him more monstrous and powerful. He ended up being like, he was like 8 feet tall, and he was like, his one arm was turned into like basically a crab claw. It's like covered in fucking spikes and shit. And he had basically was corrupting himself and like turning him into basically a demon monster. And he wanted to take the surface. So there was a group of people who fought against him. Well, he, over a long period of time, after a large battle and a long war, he made it to the top of this mountain and began a ritual to push himself into godhood. And he was basically almost a god, but was in that very awkward space right before he became a god, where he was still killable by mortal means. But he had the power of a god, so it was very dangerous. A lot of people died. A lot of good people died fighting him. So when he was defeated, he exploded in a large burst of necrotic and evil dark energy, because someone stabbed him with a wand of, it was a wand or staff of daylight, which is basically normal, just a spell for making things super bright so you can see what you're doing in the dark. It's not as weak as the light spell. Daylight it's the same effect of just being outside, basically, but in a bubble. And in 3.5, which is when this part of the campaign took place, magic weapons, if they break, all of the charges of the spell that are in the magic item go off, and there's a big explosion, and it's really dangerous, and people can die from fucking up magical weapons. So this wand or staff got stabbed into him and then snapped off, and it exploded, taking a creature that is a drow who has sensitivity to daylight and just rinsing his whole insides out with daylight. Like 12 charges of daylight went off inside this guy, and he exploded because he had turned himself into a necrotic god of evil and darkness. But there was a massive explosion, and a lot of people that were fighting him got really badly injured, and the mountain, the top of it, got destroyed in the explosion. And inside the mountain there was some obsidian mines. The mountain exploded, and this obsidian was charged by his necrotic power. Because in my world, a bunch of different stones and magic items, or magic, like, jewels and stones can sort of hold different types of magic. So garnet is a stone that in real life is attributed towards things like health and keeping yourself strong. So garnet can actually hold healing spells and can sometimes supercharge rituals that are being done for the sake of healing. So every stone and gem in the world has its own affinity to a specific element. And obsidian is connected to necrotic. It doesn't mean that obsidian is evil, it's really good at holding necrotic magic. And, not all necrotic magic is evil, but a lot of it is. Or at least it's super dangerous depending on who gets their hands on it. So this was a very powerful dark entity that exploded, and all of that energy shot outward and went into this obsidian. So the mountain exploded, and all around the mountain, this obsidian rained down from the sky. Massive chunks, small chunks, tiny pebbles everywhere, just all over. And some people, like they do in real life, are sort of ambulance chasers. They see something happen, or they see people who are in need, and they go just to be there, just to see what's going on, so they can be the first person to go back home and be like, hey guys, did you see what happened? Well, I was there, I saw it. You know what I mean? So in this situation, there were also like grave robbers and people who normally during war will show up after the fight is over to just pick off the scraps, basically, to find anything that they can sell to make money. So, of course, a massive explosion that blew a chunk in the top of one of the biggest mountains on this continent, it drew some attention, and a lot of people showed up and started mining this obsidian and picking up these small pieces and trying to get large chunks back to the city to sell to people, because at that point it was just stone filled with magic. Super powerful magic. Think of the things that you could do. A wizard could use it and be able to cast spells much more stronger than what he's capable of. So these people started picking up the stones and selling them, but then eventually some bad people got involved, and those stones got spread over a long period of time all over the world, and are used for a lot of really bad things. One of the biggest group of people that are bad who use those stones is a group called the Black Lotus, which is basically like a necromantic cult. A group of necromancers whose whole point is to try and revive their leader who died a long time ago. So they collect these stones like crazy. They go everywhere trying to find whatever they can do to find these pieces of obsidian, to use them for different rituals, for different spells, trying to collect enough power to bring back their previous leader, whose name was Annabite. And he was just a person. He was not like he's not like a god or a demon or anything. It's just a guy who did a lot of really fucked up stuff, but for good reason, depending on how you look at it. Very chaotic good kind of vibes. He wanted to take over the world not because he wanted the power, but because he genuinely thought he was the only person who could help everyone. And if he would have ever gotten in charge, the world would have been better off. It's just people would have had less freedoms, so, it would not have been great. People would have been very upset. But yeah. So that was a long spiel. But yeah, that was a big thing that happened in one of the campaigns, and it basically rewrote the history of this whole area. This whole, not just this top part, but the whole continent itself was changed for the worse because of that situation. Obviously, that demon guy had to be killed. He's a very dangerous man, but obviously there were some side effects to that. So let me check the chat, because I've been talking for a while. A lot of you guys talking about food and how to find food in this world, different places where you can get food. So that is also a very important thing to think about, but it's definitely something that I would save for last if you're trying to build a world. Something that's that in-depth, something that's like, I don't know, like, the different kinds of, like, cultural cuisines of the different people who live in parts of your world. That's definitely something that you should save for last. But we're going to move on now, because the reason I brought this map up in the first place was because we were talking about building a world. This world, you basically want to start with just mapping out the land masses. So that's where I started here. I had a massive sheet of paper when this world started. That was it was just a giant ream of paper that we kept rolling out to make more map for the campaign. And at first, we basically just made large land masses. The map started basically just these 3 continents here. And slowly, as campaigns went on, and we sailed across oceans and did other things and started in different parts of the world and then worked our way out, this is where we got to. But if you want to start with something that's this big and then allow the campaign to start, that's fine too. You can totally do that. So basically just draw an outline of all the land masses. At least ones that would be noticeable on a world map. Something that takes more than a couple of days to travel across. Obviously, on this map, I don't have things like streams. I don't have things like roads. There are some small towns that are so small that they wouldn't need to be on a world map. Things like that. Leave that shit blank. Don't worry about adding that stuff in, because that stuff, you can always sort of use that later as you're playing. As you're playing in a game, or while you're writing your book, or while you're making a show or a video game or whatever, those towns can always be around, and you can put them wherever you want, without having to sort of lock yourself into having a map that shows it all the time. It gives you a little bit more freedom to do things, instead of being like, oh, well, you know, I really want to put the next campaign somewhere in here, but there's already a lot of towns and a lot of things going on here. I don't really know where to put something. You go, okay, well, it could just be a little tiny town that isn't worth the time of the guy making the world map, that's only got like 10 people living in it. Maybe it's just a family. Maybe there's one group of farmers that just lives like right on this lake, like right here. And there's no reason for them to be on a world map. And the road that goes to the main road that they take doesn't need to be on the world map. So I have basically just slightly larger towns and big cities on this map. But I started with just a scribble of a world map of like the land masses and the islands, right? Some of these islands are small on the world map, but if you were to go there, would be pretty big. It'd be a couple days across, possibly. I'm always playing a little game with a friend where we're like doing events and giving the other person choices, and they influence history and culture and the map, which is very fun. Yeah, exactly. What if the goblins and the kobolds form a fused underground empire to overthrow the tall people who trampled on them? That's also a really good idea. To just having a group of like a bunch of really small creatures coming together as like a way to fight back. So step one in building your world: just get a piece of paper, doodle some land masses on it. Doesn't have to be super in-depth, doesn't have to be very detailed. Just make some shapes that you find interesting, and maybe think about how those land masses came to form. So let me bring up another example of a world map here, because I was just talking about creating land masses and how those land masses could have formed and stuff, like taking that stuff into account. So here's another world map, which is a world that I would like to talk to you guys about in extreme detail, because this is a new world that I'm working on, and I haven't really gotten to play in it very often. We did some play testing and stuff in it, but I have a lot of world building stuff, and I would like to hear what you guys think about some of it, because you might actually be able to help me create this world. As you can see, it is very much so new, because there's still a whole lot of empty negative space. In fact, I think there might be a more up-to-date version of this map, but we don't have to worry about that right now. I'll show you guys that later. The important part here is right here. I decided that I wanted a meteor strike on this world. Yeah, exactly. Everyone's already talking about the top right and how they like it. So that's what I'm talking about, right? I decided, like, oh, it would be interesting if there was like a meteor strike. Obviously, it didn't need to be very big, because you don't want to, blow up your planet or whatever, but it was obviously big enough to, like, thousands and thousands and thousands of years later, this is what the world looks like after all the shifting and everything. You can still see where it happened, and that's crazy. And then I did some other things too, of like, you can kind of tell that like some of these islands broke off from like chunks of the world that used to be connected. Like by the looks of it, these two were probably connected at one point and slowly broke into pieces and like shifted out into these islands and everything. You can kind of tell that these two continents may or may not have been slightly connected, but had a large series of lakes that sort of made it easier to break apart from each other. That meteor definitely wiped out all of life on the rest of the map. Yeah, probably. But you know, there's fantasy involved, so you could always say, like, if you wanted to do a meteor strike too, and you were worried about something like that, you could go, oh, well, you know, it's fantasy, whatever. Like, not everything was destroyed, or you know, it could be a meteor strike, like what happens in like Earth's history, where a lot of things died, but not everything. Just a lot, pretty much most of the stuff on the surface. But yeah, this is another great example of setting up your map. So once you have step one, draw a bunch of random shapes. Step two, decide more geographically specific ideas about your map. So start putting down mountains. Start putting down forests. Don't feel like you're locked in. Just sort of create something that you think looks nice. And you know, your brain will start to ask you questions, and you'll slowly fill things in about your world as you're creating the general shape of what you want it to look like. Also, be very aware of how maps are actually made in real life, because if you don't, you might accidentally make a map that makes just absolutely no fucking sense. So, just because you go off one side of the map does not necessarily mean that you will come out on the exact opposite side of the map. You have to think about this as if it's on a globe, and it's not a big flat square. Unless your world is a big flat square, who fucking knows? But yeah, just not a lot of research in the maps, just enough to understand that video games are fucking liars, and you can't just go up the top of the map and come out the bottom of the map. But yeah, that's your step one and step two, right? All right, let's jot this down, just so then we don't lose track, and I don't have to keep repeating myself over and over again and making you guys go crazy. Step one. Step one, make land masses. 2, geography and nature. So that's like your mountains, your trees and such, right? I'm going to change my oh my god, I'm so sorry. My brain won't let me. That looked like shit. All right. Land masses. Geography and nature. 3. All right, let me check the chat real quick. So don't put a tundra beside a desert. Okay, so here's the thing. You could technically do that. Weird shit like that happens in real life a lot. Just figure out how those things happen. Do some research on how mountains work, because there are different situations in which just a mountain or a valley is a big enough divider between two biomes that you could put two very different biomes right next to each other, depending on how the rest of your world works. Or you could also potentially have, extreme changes in elevation that would change how cold or how hot a place is and still be next to a place that is the exact opposite. You could have an area that is very high up that gets snow and gets very cold just because it's very high up. And then right next to it is just a very, very low space that's got, it gets very warm. And then just a few miles out turns into desert. You don't know. Yeah, even real nature can be pretty crazy. It's to Tank about, quote, it's fantasy, so it can be whatever you want. Consistency is still important. Yes, no, do not misunderstand me. That is very important and is actually a very big pet peeve of mine. Just because something is fantasy does not mean that your world can just be chaos and not make any fucking sense. As Mohawk says, consistency is very important. That means if your world is going to be crazy and not make any sense, it all needs to be crazy and not make sense all in the same way. If everything you do does not connect with itself and it all feels crazy and none of it makes any sense collectively together, then you're going to have some issues. A perfect example, I just got done binge watching all of Smiling Friends. If you if you've never seen that show or haven't gotten a chance to watch it, go do it. It's really good. The first episode specifically, the pilot, is hilarious, and I think is one of the better episodes. There's also a fantasy episode where they go to the Enchanted Forest, which is fucking hilarious. But generally, very good show. That show is fucking crazy. It's insane. The things that you see, the people and how they look, the way the world works, the things they talk about, the way they react to things, it's fucking cuckoo bananas. But the level of cuckoo bananas is consistent and is normally played almost exclusively for a joke. There's a lot of subversion of expectations in that show, but done properly. And it's really, really funny, and you should check that out. But that's a perfect example. You want to make sure that everything in your world makes the same amount of sense, regardless of whether it makes any sense at all. If that makes sense. Okay. Dude, you have enough pet peeves to make a zoo. Yeah, fucking tell me about it. Town of tree people, an active volcano party. For no good reason, because we should have a problem with that. What about technology? You mean just in a world building sense? Like if you wanted to add technology? I mean, obviously, yeah, you could do that. That is a little bit more of an in-depth thing of thinking about, like, after you've created a society on your world, you then can start thinking about the more specific things. Yeah, like guns and armor and stuff like that. Like, you can think about why it is they have those things and other places don't. Or maybe you want your world to have all of that stuff. My sword has a built-in iPhone. Yeah, I mean, your world the technology in your world can be whatever you want it to be. It can be very old school, it could be non-existent, it can be futuristic but still have like medieval stuff in it. We have a medieval guy, but he has nukes. Yeah, no, there was this really weird thing that happened in the 80s and earlier, and it happened all the fucking time, where people would make these, like, medieval shows and games and stuff, but then they would get, like, worried that people wouldn't like it, so, like, 3/4 of the way through the movie or the game, it would suddenly get super sci-fi out of fucking nowhere. So there is a movie, I can't remember what it's called. It's got Reb Brown in it. And he is a caveman, basically, who just beats people with clubs. And then the end of that movie is people with, like, laser guns. And he's, like, fighting lizard aliens and shit. It's fucking chaos. He rides a giant bat into a cave and, like, double drop kicks a dude in the face. It's fucking fun. It's not a good movie, but I mean, go watch it. If you can find out the name, I can't remember what it's called at this point. But yeah, okay. Next question. Oh, we're getting some new people into the stream. Cool. Welcome. Thanks for stopping by. We're in the middle of our world building seminar. And we're going through the different stages, like each step to creating your own world. And we basically just got done creating the actual world itself. So I believe the next thing that I would do after that would probably be the gods. That seems like a pretty decent jumping off point. What do you guys think? Jesus Christ, what is wrong with my hand today? Oh my goodness, what is happening? Okay, so we're gonna jump into gods next, which is a very important question because in some settings, your world might not have gods, which is totally fine. You don't have to have gods in your world, or their gods could be dead. The gods could be not super important. The gods could be disconnected from the world. They could have left. Who knows? There's so many fun ideas that you can play with. But we're going to go ahead and I'm going to bring up my gods just as a jumping off point so then you guys can get some ideas of the kinds of gods that you might want to put into your world to make things a little bit easier for you. In my D&D world, there's not a whole lot of gods as of right now because I'm slowly sort of building that out as we go, the Pantheon. You guys may have seen my videos that I've posted about my gods and everything. Excuse me. So these gods are a little bit different than other people's deities. They're very much so connected to the world that they are a part of. It would not be crazy to speak to a deity in my world. Obviously, it would be amazing if you met someone who had spoken to a god. That's a big deal. But it's not impossible, and it's not something unheard of. So, for those of you who want a little bit more in-depth understanding of my gods, you'll probably want to watch my 2 Pantheon videos where I explain it in detail, because it's a lot to cover, and I don't want to go over all of that right now. We'll do a brief summary just so you guys aren't completely lost. But in my world, there was some creatures called Titans. Large, massive, eldritch creatures that are impossible to understand. If a human being were to see them, their brain couldn't comprehend it. The world itself is one of these titans, and whether it's alive or it's dead is kind of unknown. No one knows if the titan created the planet or is the planet. But there was a titan that created the cosmos. Then there was the titan that is or created the planet. There is a titan of light. There's a titan of darkness. There's a titan of fire. All of these creatures, all these entities, basically created the world using all of their different powers. Not quite gods. These are the creators of the cosmos and the creator of the gods. So they basically, they create lesser beings like lesser titans and things like that. And these titans are not great. They basically destroy everything and make the world like really fucked, which then leads the elder titans into creating gods. And the gods help wipe out these lesser titans that were created. And there's a massive war, and it's very detailed. The lore of my gods is very detailed. But we, like I said, we're not going to go super in depth. But now we have these gods, and each of these gods was created for a very specific purpose. So we have the god of valor, the endless valor. He is a god of protection and justice, general vibes like that, right? Every god is connected to an element. His is wind, and is basically like a protector god. He is, like I said, he's basically the god, like a god of justice. We have the Savage Warden, which is a war god. We have the Sovereign of Cinder, which is a god of fire, who is the goddess of the sun. We have the Withering Lady, which is the god of death, basically. And also, gods of death don't necessarily have to be evil. They can be neutral. God is a thing. Death is a thing that happens to everybody. It's an inevitability. So, a god of death does not necessarily have to enjoy taking life. They just know that it has to happen. So those are 4. Then I have another 4, which for whatever reason I do not have the images for. The hell did I do? They're all gone. I'll open them up in Photoshop. I got Photoshop open anyway. So we've got the Hound of Thorns. He is a god of nature and neutrality, and his element is connected to Earth, which I have. You guys have seen all of these if you've seen my Pantheon videos. We have the Maiden of Whispers, who is connected to the element of water. And she's like the peace god. We have the Undying Scholar, which is connected to knowledge and the arcane. And, despite him looking super evil, he's not really. It's just he does not see... He doesn't see things as good as bad. He just sees them as more knowledge for him to collect over time. He wants to become the smartest entity in the universe, which he probably is. But he's not afraid of things like necrotic magic, titan magic, the unknown. He wants to make it the known. He wants to learn everything, regardless of what it will do to him and other people. Then we have the Obsidian Weaver, who is basically the god of darkness, and people don't really know a whole lot about her. Now, all of these images are... I did them just for the YouTube channel. These gods don't even necessarily look like these images that I have here. Because every culture is going to see them differently. Every culture is going to, if they were to meet them, they would look different. If they were to speak with them, they would speak with a different voice and would talk differently. the idea is that it's not that these people control the way that the gods are, the way that these gods look. It's just the way that the god chooses to be perceived by these people. Because cultures all over the planet worship the sun. And there is only one sun god, but they call the sun god different things. And they visualize that sun god in different ways. So that's an important thing to keep track of when you're doing gods. You don't even need to have an idea of what they look like. They don't have to look like anything. In fact, in your world, gods might be inconceivable to the human mind. What about a god that is a loner? So what do you mean? Like a god that he doesn't partake in the Pantheon, or like he keeps to himself? I mean, it is possible. It would be a little difficult because gods sort of all run the same world. So if one of the gods wanted to keep to himself, the other ones would either be pretty upset about that or would actively try and pull him in. So yeah, okay, so gods. As you can see, I have like 10 gods at this point, but I've only shown you the 8. Those are the 8 base gods that I started with. So you don't need that many gods. You basically just want to cover the most general concepts for your world. Maybe you want to do a god for every element, and you want to keep it simple, but you're like, oh well, how many elements? The base 6 that I always use: fire, water, wind, earth, and then light and dark, if you want to add that in as well. You could always just start there. Create a god that's in charge of that. A god that's whole purpose is like, okay, here's a god of fire. Every single flame that exists on this planet exists because he exists. If that god were to die, fire would not be a thing that mortals would be capable of creating anymore. Things like that. These gods are all powerful, they're all knowing, and they really can't be stopped. Not by mortal means, anyway. So, do we have any questions for how to create a pantheon or working on gods? Like any more... I gave you like a general gist of covering the gods, but do we have any questions that are a bit more specific? I'll give that a second for you guys to reply. Maybe he had been banished. Okay, so I like that idea, a god that has been banished. The first thing that comes to mind for me, at least for when someone says banished god, my brain immediately thinks of the idea of a god that all the other gods decided, like, you're not allowed to be a god anymore. And if that god were to have survived that altercation, they could be turned into some kind of very powerful entity on the surface of your world. Maybe a dragon, or some kind of giant, or maybe they still look the same and are still like this massive being of power, but are now killable. They're not immortal. They may be immortal in the means of that they live forever, or they live for a very long time compared to other people, but they could die. It is possible to kill them if you're strong enough. So let's see. Maybe a war god that has been banished for being too strong. That could possibly work. Do you personally feel there is such a thing as too many gods? Yes, Probably. So D&D does this a lot, or at least in 3.5 they did. They had a book that they released that was just filled with like hundreds of gods, which was really cool to read, but it was really dangerous because it was also filled with stat blocks. So it told people how strong a god was. So as soon as you make a stat block for something, some dickhead is going to try and kill it. That is a basic D&D rule. If you tell me that Hercules is a level 20 warrior and a fucking level 20 paladin, and he's got 15 levels of barbarian, I am going to figure out a way to kill that fucker. So then I can be the guy who runs around to all my D&D friends and says, hey, I'm the guy who killed fucking Hercules. So, like, I would refrain from doing that if at all possible. Unless you want a world where the gods are very powerful, but are killable. The idea that, like, maybe in your setting a god can be killed, and then you take their power, or you take their place, or something like that. But back to the question, all of the gods in that book just made it insane. And a lot of the gods covered the same stuff. And to me, I feel like that's where it becomes too much. If you have multiple gods that all reign over the same domain or cover the same powers, I then question how they all exist together and what happens if one of them is killed, which could be a really cool and interesting concept, but D&D never covers that because they give you the books and it's your job to figure it out, right? Which is, I mean, that's what they're made for. That's the good part. So to me, maybe it would be interesting to be like, okay, there's 3 gods of fire, or not necessarily, for like, maybe there's one god of fire, right? And he's the big fucking cool one. He's the important one. But then underneath, maybe he's had children, right? And those children have aspects of fire, but aren't completely in control of fire. So, like, maybe you have a very, very lesser god of, like, campfires and, like, camaraderie and just the idea of a god who's, like, all about partying and having a good time and everyone's together sort of in a camp, right? The idea of a unit of people coming together and camping together and celebrating and drinking in front of the campfire or whatever. Maybe there's another one that maybe he has a daughter who is the goddess of the sun. Maybe he has I don't know, but you get what I'm saying. Like, there's a bunch of... He maybe has children that are all connected to fire in some way. So in that situation, you have to make sure that those gods are different enough that no one is overlapping. Or if they do, then you have to answer the question of, okay, well, what happens to the god of fire if he was to somehow miraculously die? Does the power of fire get divvied up amongst his children? If that's the case, did one of his children actively try and kill him and succeed to get some of his power? Is one of the children planning on killing all of their siblings to gain more power to then go after the father and usurp him? There's a lot of different questions there, which can be really cool and interesting world building. But yeah, I generally try and keep gods from overlapping. There are some gods that like I've explained already, you have them have children with other deities, and those two deities sort of make a mixture of a new thing. That or maybe instead of them... Maybe they just reproduce without a partner. Maybe they can just literally, with their god powers, just create children. You don't know. You can do, you do. You're in charge. You can do whatever you want. So I would say, yeah, there is a limit to how many gods you have. But there are ways to sort of push that limit back if you want to keep adding more. Let's see. Not a question, but I think a binary god system could be cool. 2 polar opposite gods that mortals pull power from to create a balance. Yeah, no, that could work. I mean, that's been used a lot by a bunch of different people. Let's see. I love the idea of a guy in a cloak searching the surface or something while secretly being a god. Yeah, the idea of a god pretending to be a person. Yeah, for sure. In my world, a lot of this stuff is like a god can't necessarily come down to the planet and just be there, because that all of the gods sort of have an agreement that is sort of like an act of war. But they do have avatars where they can sort of, all my gods have avatars that are like animals. So, like, say the Savage Warden wants to come down and speak to a barbarian that has particularly grabbed his attention. He could appear as like a bull, or maybe a paladin of the Savage Warden shows up and is like, the god has sent me to talk to you. He wants you to be his champion. Stuff like that. Different ways that gods can communicate with people. And I like the idea of him, like, sort of controlling a mortal, or he has like an avatar that seems like just like an old man beggar or something, like a god of charity or something, hanging out on the street just waiting for someone to be willing to give to a homeless person, and then rewarding that person with like more riches than they could possibly imagine, or magical powers, or whenever you need me, just flip this coin and I'll show up and I'll do your bidding for you. And I'm not a very powerful god because I'm just a god of charity, but I'm still a god, so I can pull some strings. Stuff like that is interesting. There's a lot to work with there. The god of pasta. Yeah, there we go. I would like to add that not all the gods have to be equal. There can be different tiers of gods, perhaps based on age, their role in creation, or their power level. Pantheons have layers. Yeah, exactly. So this is what I was talking about earlier, about how, like, there's the Elder Titans, then there's Lesser Titans, then there's the gods, and then there's lesser gods, and there's, like, demigods, and so, like, if a god were to have children, those children would not be as powerful as them. Because there's only so much of that power. Now, I mean, you could change the way your world works, where as soon as you become a god, you're just very strong. But normally, it's your power is normally connected to how many people worship you specifically. And you can do it however you want. But that's how I do it as well. That, like, the gods don't lose power by making children, but those children are less powerful than them. And then there's people who try and become a god and try and get into demigodhood, and they're not going to be as powerful as a god that has been a god since the beginning of time. Or a god that just was created could become stronger than a god that's been around since the beginning of time, depending on how many people worship them. That could also be a way around it, because I do that as well. A god becomes stronger the more people worship him. I think the way of killing a god to... Oh my god, I've lost it. Where the fuck did that go? I think the way of killing a god to take their power is lame. You should have to be better than the god at what they do to take their place. Yeah, I mean, I guess that could also be a thing, but then also at the same time, it's like, how would a mortal be better at something than the god of that thing? Like, how do you become the god of fire if you have to show that you're better at controlling fire than the god of fire? That seems really difficult. I mean, obviously it's possible. You can do whatever you want. But I think it depends on the type of god. I think a god of war would go, yeah, if you can best me in combat, you deserve to be the god of war. Fuck my life. I'll become mortal and you can kill me. And if you kill me, then you can take my place. I obviously don't deserve it. Like, it depends on the god, really. That makes a lot of sense, and the idea of a killable god that you gain power from could certainly spark something cool. Yeah, for sure. One of my favorite stories was in, I think it was D&D 4th edition. There was a guy, I forget his name, but he got really drunk one night, and people were swapping stories about the gods, and they were talking about a God, I'm trying to remember the lore. I'm so sorry. It's not my lore, and I read it a long time ago. They were talking and swapping stories with each other about a man who became a god, a demigod or a saint. And this guy got so drunk and was pissed off and was like, oh, well, fuck him. I'm better than him. I can do that. If he became a god, I can too. And he, like, walked up this mountain during a snowstorm, and he's drunk off his ass. And he's constantly almost dying, but he is somehow lucky enough to make his way to the top. And all of these... To become a god, there's, like... At the top of the mountain, all of these gods... want to face him on like one-on-one combat or in different challenges and tasks or whatever, and he somehow miraculously, while being completely just drunk off his ass, is able to pass all of these challenges, and the gods sort of begrudgingly have to allow him to become a deity. He becomes a demigod of like drinking and breweries and unforeseen luck and stuff like that. I forget his name, but he's like a 4th edition god. A really interesting and funny story about a guy who was so good at drinking that he became a god of drinking. But yeah, that's a good example of like a god or a person becoming a demigod. Gods having demigods under them that serve their domain. Yeah, exactly. Because why should killing the peace god make you the new peace god? Yeah, no, that's fair. Oh, Oni, hey, how's it going, man? That sounds interesting. I'm definitely going to play around with layered powers and family lines within pantheons and such. Yeah, for sure. I can't remember where I wrote it down, but I have like a different, like a breakdown of different ideas. Well, like, there are some... Just start the first tier of gods. Start with the very general concepts. And then as it goes down through the children, make them way more specific. I know it was, like, sort of a joke, but, like, genuinely, you could have one of the children of the god of fire be, like, a god of campfires and camaraderie and the idea of just, like, hanging out with people near the campfire and celebrating and stuff like that. You could have a child of the god of nature be a god of agriculture and farming and stuff like that. Yes, we are talking about gods. We are covering gods. Everyone seems really excited about that. Yeah, God's power based on their followers. Yeah, that's what I generally do too. That's the neat part, Tank. You don't. A mortal is not better than a god. Yeah, but I'm saying in a world where the only way to become a god is to take a god's place, and the only way to take a god's place is to become better at a thing than a god. It's like, why even make the system be capable of someone else becoming a... Like, why even write that down? Like, because that just makes it like, if it is impossible, then why even talk about it? How about a god for every season, but they hate each other and are always at war? Yeah, no, that's a good idea. I kind of like that. All of my gods are generally connected to a phase of the moon, but you could also do seasons and different stuff like that. Like my god of peace is also like a god of winter. Sometimes with gods, less is more. Yeah, exactly. Like we had talked about earlier, it is sometimes better to just leave it very, very vague and loosey-goosey, and not really dig too far into it. like I said, like making a stat block for a god is a very, very bad idea. A pattern that shows up in real-world mythology is that older deities represent forces of nature and concepts of reality, while later ones represent more human virtues and social values. Yeah, that's true. Old gods could be very simple and primordial. Younger gods could be complex. Yeah. What's the next step? Okay, yeah, we'll jump to something else. Let me read this one thing. I am of the opinion that Titans and Primordials have gotten the short end of the stick for too long. My world has them shining proud and powerful as they should. Yeah, no, that's a good idea. See, my elder Titans and Primordials and stuff that created the world are still generally around. They're just in the back seat because it's very taboo to try and study them and learn more about them, because they're very dangerous and people don't know anything about them. Okay, yeah, so we're going to jump now from gods to the next step. We can go over... let's do... yeah, cultures and stuff is a good idea, but we want to do, like... Jesus... Cities, towns, villages. And then we'll... I am so sorry for my writing. This is just awful. I like gods that are so bored they made the world as a game to play against each other. Each god made a race that have free will, and without direct intervention, they have to win. No, that's a good idea. As long as the people who live there have some form of free will, that can work. I am not a big fan of settings where like the gods are just basically in control of everything, and the people have like no free will and everything's destiny and preordained, because then you get into that chosen one mentality, and that never ends well. Time to actually start populating. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, we're gonna go into culture and everything, but let's start. So we're gonna start with cities and towns and villages and stuff like that, and start populating your world. So let's see here. Let me bring up one of my maps again. What do we? Which one do you guys want? Do you want the D&D map, or do you want the? Yeah, let's do the D&D map. Let me see if I can better find that fucking folder again, because last time it was just a shit show. I found it immediately. There we go. All right, so like I had told you guys previously, the first thing that was added to this map was the top part of this continent. Trying to remember exactly where we started. Oh, okay, now I remember. So, this started in Winter Haven, which, the only reason that this exists is technically because that's a D&D, that's like a D&D city, like a very specific, like it's in their canon. Because the first person who was DMing sort of, we didn't know it was going to turn into a massive campaign, so it was basically just a one-shot, and we were using like a module that was talking about like Winter Haven and stuff like that. So it has accidentally kind of morphed into the world. But yeah, in this situation for a D&D campaign, the campaign took place specifically here in Winter Haven, so that was the first thing that was created. He came up with a massive city, and the thing is, if it's a D&D setting, you do not need to know all the extreme details about the city. That stuff can be created as you go, from the players sort of asking questions or talking amongst each other, trying to figure out how your world works. And they might eventually say something to you or to each other, and you just think to yourself, oh, that's actually a really good idea. I think I'm going to steal that. Because no one ever gets upset about that. They go, oh man, I was right. I totally knew it. And everyone's like, yeah, you did. That's crazy. It just makes it a little bit more fun, because everyone is sort of making the world together. You know what I mean? Like, it's a back and forth. It's not just you anymore. It's a collective. Fun fact: Varstein is a German beer company, and you named a town Varstein. You alcoholic. That I was not aware of. So for Winter Haven, right? We just started with a name, right? And Winter Haven, what the hell is that sound? Someone's like scraping their windshield off with a bird or something. It's an awful sound. So Winter Haven, right? That was the name. Obviously, it's called that for a reason. So you start going, okay, well, it either snows here a lot or it's always covered in snow. Everything's awful. Winter Haven, also depending on the area and like the places around it, have a lot of agriculture, a lot of farming, but because it's like because it's snowing all the time, or at least their winters are very bad, they have to be careful about what they farm and when they farm, which then leads into other things, right? So like maybe the things that they don't have access to, they get from other people. So we have the Golden Meadows up north, which is a lot of wheat and corn, grain, things like that. And that can be like imported or exported, which is very, very specific extra stuff that doesn't need to be jumped into immediately. You just want to have like a general idea, and a lot of it is just like, as you're creating the world, or if you're doing a D&D setting, people are talking and playing the game and asking questions, and it sort of just comes to you. So like at some point you will decide like, okay, I need to add some more extra towns or another city, or the party was asking about something, and you direct them to somewhere else. And then the next time you play, you have that whole place built. So then when they get there, they're ready to interact with that town specifically. So Eidendrol, that is like the capital for the elves. That's a very massive elven city that their main like capital building is one giant massive tree, and they all live up in the canopies and stuff. Craghelm is a small settlement or town that was controlled by the dwarves. They were the ones who were mining the obsidian before that mountain exploded. As you can see, there's a red circle off to the right side there. That is that denotes a desert, and there's these like brown little circles that you can see. So like right here and right here. Those are cities that used to exist but are no longer. So they're either like ruins, or not, just completely non-existent. And that is actually where there were actually some Dragonborn who lived there. I know someone was asking about... so yeah, there's... the Dragonborn used to live here, and that was where their cities were, and they sort of lost them to the desert and are now big ruins that people come out to sort of try and find resources and magical items that got lost to time and stuff like that. Then we slowly start expanding outward. There were some campaigns that took place in the south, so, you know, these white lines are bigger roads. I call them highways. They're not... It's not like a highway like you would understand in, like, in real life. It's like how a highwayman is basically a bandit on the road. Like, that is... They are big enough and important enough roads that they go onto a world map like this. I also have these symbols here, which denote that there is a very big and powerful dragon that lives there. I have them all over the map, actually, and each symbol represents... it's for a different dragon of a different element. It is to mark the biggest dragon of each element. So, here is that is the biggest known red dragon to the world. So they want to make sure everyone is aware of where these dragons live, so they don't go fucking around and finding out, and dealing with, dealing with some extremely dangerous and deadly creatures. Here's a water serpent dragon. A lot of people try not to sail across here or through this area because of that. It's very dangerous. I'm making a game and have apex creatures marked on my map. Yes, exactly. So that's a really good idea. The one thing I struggle with is knowing how many dragons to put in my world. It really depends on what you're going for. For me, these ones are just big, massive, like, world bosses, basically. So if someone in a campaign really wanted to test their character out, or their party, and they really wanted to kill a big fuck-off dragon, this is where this is where they would go find those things. There are other dragons that exist on this world. They're just much smaller. I mean, you could flood your whole world with dragons, like smaller dragons, like wyverns and stuff, but that is a big map. Yes, it is. What map maker had the balls to find these massive dragons and figure out where they are on the map? So these markers are actually fairly vague. It's just like there have been spottings of dragons in these areas, so stay the fuck away from them. Because, you know, it is easy to see... if it's the biggest dragon known to man and it's flying around in the sky, people are going to fucking see it. So he didn't necessarily have to get very close. Me just seeing a world with one dragon per square meter. I have a swamp with 3 dragons. They all want to kill each other, but nobody wants to strike first because if they get injured in the fight, the other one will finish them off. Yeah, okay, so in that world, I mean, obviously I don't know more about your world, but in that situation, it sounds like dragons are fairly common and are more of a... Are dragons in your setting sort of like an in-between of, like, gods and mortals? Where they're, like... they're almost beyond mortal. They're like really hard to kill, and they live a really long time. And they have like really crazy powers. Every step is 10 more dragons. Giants deserve more love. They were the rivals of dragons for ages and still are. Yeah, I have some giants, actually. So I have this place called the Weeping Forge, which is actually a massive fire giant keep that they have this massive forge called the Weeping Forge because it's they use lava from the underground that like flows straight out of their forge, and they forge with lava and stuff like that. And there's a dragon right there as well. I believe it might be like an earth dragon. I can't remember. Dragons are more like raccoons or squirrels. You could do that. You could have the idea that maybe dragons used to be very large and powerful, but they're just outnumbered by humans, like way more than they could possibly comprehend. And it's like one of those situations of like the T-Rex to a chicken, right? Now dragons are just little tiny fuckers that are seen as more of a nuisance than a huge country-ending threat. I just fought 2 silver dragons in D&D a couple weeks ago. I calmed one and convinced it to calm the other one with a +1 in my animal handling. Jesus Christ. Then why is it there? A dragon symbol. Why is there a dragon symbol there? Kill it. In my world, dragons are the ones who brought the magic into the world, but then were enslaved by humans until a necromancer killed them or forced them to escape through a portal. The magic came from it. So I actually like that a lot because my one, the one primordial, the one of flame, he's the reason that fire exists on my world in the plane, and he is referred to as the first of the dragons because he was basically a dragon, just a massive fuck off, very generic red dragon. What about a world with domesticated dragons? Okay, now you're getting into Dragon Rider shit, which I am here for, bud. I've actually played in a few campaigns in that setting. It's super fun, where basically you train for a large majority of your life to get to the point where you get to have a dragon, or you grow up with a dragon, and you sort of learn and grow together until eventually you get to pilot this dragon against other people who have dragons, and you're fighting each other, or you're going to war against people who don't have dragons. Super cool concept. Alduin wants to know your location. How to Train Your Dragon is the best movie series ever. No one can convince me otherwise. That series is good. What about a campaign where the players are dragons? I mean, that sounds interesting. I could definitely see people having fun doing that. I don't know if something like that is for me. The idea of... I don't know. There are some settings that I wouldn't normally jump into, but if I knew ahead of time that was what the campaign was going for, then I could lean into it a little bit. Nothing upsets me more than when I'm playing a normal medieval fantasy campaign and then all of a sudden the DM's like, so here's a laser gun, and I'm like, fuck you. Why? What? Like, you didn't even warn me before this happened that this was going to be a sci-fi campaign. Then I could have prepared myself. I really think monsters should be more intertwined in society. Wyvern and griffin riders, different mounts used for transportation, military, whatever. Yeah, that's a super good idea. In the Golden Meadows, before a certain party came through, they had a bullet problem. A bullet is basically a land shark covered in like metal plates, and they dig through the ground and just like fuck everything up. Um, and until a party figured out a way to tame them, by no means are they domesticated. They are still very dangerous, and you need to be really careful. Only certain people that are very like hardy people of the earth types are brave enough to have a farm of them. But it helps like till their fields and deal with smaller pests and threats to their otherwise fairly tame land, because like I said, they're basically it's just a massive area of fields of corn and wheat and stuff like that. I just imagine a campaign where all the animals are just dragon variants. All encounters are dragons in a sewer attacked by a rat dragon. Yeah, or when you join what you think is a serious campaign and someone's character is Sonic the Hedgehog. Yes, that kind of stuff pisses me off. Because I generally take D&D very seriously, but here's the thing, except for when I don't. But I make sure that everyone is aware, like, hey, this campaign is not going to be super serious. Or I tell them, like, hey, this campaign is going to be really gritty, and it's going to be serious. And we can joke around at the table and have a good time, but there will be a moment where, like, you guys are going to have to make some hard decisions, and you're going to have to take it a little bit more seriously than, like, dick and fart jokes, you know? On the subject of dragons, having things in the ocean like krakens can make moving between continents more exciting. Yeah, absolutely, for sure. For my campaigns, I generally stay away from traveling. Like, people can travel, and I tell them how much resources they'll need, how long it's going to take, stuff like that. But I generally skip over anything that isn't either exciting or is just a waste of time. I used to do it a lot, and I know a lot of DMs still do this, where they'll just be like, oh yeah, the party will need to travel from one town to another, and they'll just get attacked by like 3 or 4 different encounters, and then that's the whole session, right? No one wants to be out in the woods. No one wants to fight 4 fucking bears or 12 kobolds or like... They want to get to the next town where all of the story is happening. They all want to go to that town in the first place. That's why they asked you to travel them there. And now you're going to waste a whole session basically having them fight shit that is either really easy to fight and gets them very little experience and no treasure, or they're going to fight something super powerful and their hero is going to die via fighting a fucking wolf in the woods. And it's like... Jesus Christ, my guy. Like, we were in the middle of, like, some espionage shit, and, like, we've got some NPCs that we want to talk to, and, like, there's some people that we actually want to fight, and this just feels like it's slowing everything down. Like, obviously, in a regular, like, in a video game, you would want to have stuff like that, because then traveling would just be a slog. But at a table, it just seems unnecessary. Always when I DM my players' main goal is to get their characters drunk. I hate it so much. I'm sorry, that sucks. I know it's hard to deal with campaigns sometimes, and different people who they don't want to play the game the same way you do. That's why I swear by session 0. Where everyone gets together to make their characters, and you get to explain your system and your world, and you get to tell them what kind of campaign you're playing, and what they should expect from you, and what you expect from them. And it really clears the air and gets everyone on the same page. Story can be placed in travel. For example, you find a strange glowing cave, or you hear a scream, side stories. Yeah, yeah, that can definitely be the case. But in that situation, I feel like it would be important, or the big important difference there between just like, oh, you guys sleep for the night, and then someone rolls a perception, and oh, you wake up, you hear some sound, then you wake up the party, then we roll initiative, and we fight, and then you win, and then we keep going. Where nothing good happened there, and it was just boring. What you're suggesting could actually work. The idea of saying, hey, you're on your travels, and you notice this. The party can then decide to just go, well, fuck that, or we'll mark it on the map, or hey, sidebar, let's do this right now. Fuck what we were doing, this looks interesting. That can work for sure. Shall we make something? Can we make something now? Yeah, sure. If you guys want to jump to that part, we can for sure. So before we do that, let me just at least jot down the other things that you could do here. So next up would be like figuring out how these cultures and cities and towns and everything can function. Like, what's your we had talked about technology before, so tech. So more specifically, like weapons, armor, knowledge, stuff like that. So like, are there guns? Things like that. Do people have electricity? Do people still use like a horse and buggy? Is there a very specific kind of horse and buggy that they use? Is there magic in your world? That would be another big important thing. So we'll do like magic? So then in that after that, you've figured out the kind of technology they have, the different magic that they have. Start working on like the different races that exist in your world. Then at that point, you can start working on like more in-depth culture. We've got like import, export. We've got supplies and stuff, like the different foods that they eat, who they have alliances with. And then at that point, then you start working on territories, which is a fun one. What land does everyone own? Do they work together? Are people fighting over land? Is there war and stuff like that? Then that obviously leads into number 10, which is like the deep lore. The lore is super important. That's the fun stuff. So, all right. These are just the basic stuff. You don't even necessarily have to do these in this order. It's just better to work for like general to specific, but you guys can obviously jump into whatever interests you the most. Just be cautious of not like, you don't want to like overwork yourself and accidentally push too far into some of these categories and just like burn yourself out. So it's still going. World building guides leave everything out. Dumb idea. Everyone in the chat takes an area and creates some stuff, and then we hit it together. Okay, so real quick, I am going to step away for a bit. For those of you that are watching this video later, hopefully I can edit this out. If not, I apologize. I will be back as soon as possible. But I've just got to go take care of a few things. And then when I come back, you guys feel free to keep posting ideas in the chat, and then we'll create a world right now, and that's how we will end the stream. Okay? So just let me know what you guys, just give me your ideas, so then when I get back, I'll go over everything with you. Okay? All right, I'll be right back. Alright, guys, I am back. Sorry about that. Oh no, something's happening to the stream. What is going on? The audio stream oh. Well, it was telling me something was wrong with my audio, but it was because my audio was off. Okay, so, hello everybody. I see our numbers are back up. We got some more people in here. Sorry that you came in during the break, and thank you for sticking around. So we were just about to take the things that I jotted down over here, our Spark Notes version of everything we've talked about so far, and we were about to take all that stuff and we're going to make our own world. So I stepped away for a bit to give you guys time to send in some ideas, so we're going to go ahead and talk about those now. So let me scroll back up real quick. So yeah, okay, we've got a few people suggesting what the setting should be. Something generic. So we've got, someone was asking about doing just a classical fantasy. We've got one for post-apocalyptic fantasy. Ancient civilization. Okay, so real quick then, before we keep going, what do you guys think? What are we leaning towards then? Do we want to do a fantasy setting? Or maybe it's a fantasy setting that that didn't used to be, so maybe we could combine the two. It's a post-apocalyptic medieval fantasy where I mean that's a little overdone, but what do you guys think? It is a little overdone to have like there was once an advanced civilization and then they're gone and now there's just medieval people again. We could do a post-apocalyptic thing that is still medieval. What do you guys think? Let me see here. Anyone say anything? That's way more sci-fi, yeah. Oh, you guys ended up deciding something? Okay, let me read through and see what you guys all said here. A Greek-themed fantasy world after an apocalyptic event. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. I like this idea. Some kind of like volcano eruption, and the ashes blocked out the sun and turned everything into like an eternal winter. Okay, so we're doing like a cold, everything's fucked kind of scenario. Let me keep reading, see if you guys changed your minds on that. Yeah, everyone's like nomads. Yeah, because we were talking about Titans and Primordials earlier, so some kind of elemental calamity sounds interesting. Yeah, okay, so it seems like that's what you guys landed on. Oh, maybe like an underground Athens, but the people cut each other... Wait, what? The people cut each other in pieces to make their own body better by perhaps stitching a stolen eye into the back of their head. Jesus Christ, my guy. That could be interesting. Let me write that down. The people in the underground Athens could also be constantly rotting and always in need of new body parts. Jesus, that's very dark. That doesn't mean bad, but it... rich people buy body parts to live longer. Okay, so ancient civilization. After an elemental apocalypse, nomadic cultures, different ways of survival and rebuilding civilization and such. Okay, cool. Perfect. Okay, now, I like this idea. Let me just shift some stuff around on my desk so I can bring the tablet in front of myself a little bit. I'll drop a new... Oh my god, my drawing glove is gone! Oh, here it is. Alright, I'm gonna get my drawing glove on so I can write a little bit better and not like a psychopath. Maybe jot some ideas and stuff down. We need to keep this here, though, because this is very important. We're just going to... We'll just make it smaller in the top corner. Perfect. Alright. So we have... That's too big. Okay, bullet point 1. Oh my god, guys. I still cannot... I don't know what's wrong with me today. Alright, so we have an ancient civilization, and there was some kind of elemental apocalypse. I do really like the idea of the volcano. What do you guys think? Okay, we got some people saying, okay, we're going to lock in volcano then. So there was a awful volcanic event that sent ash and soot into the air and darkened the skies and just really fucked everything up. Which means our world is either very small or that volcano is really fucking big. If it changed the temperature of our world, like, permanently. So then the real question is that volcano just a natural forming volcano, or was that some kind of, like... Is it magical or connected to, like, deities in some way? Natural volcano. Could be a chain of volcanoes. Okay, it started like a reaction. Okay, so maybe there's a group of people who think that this was some kind of religious event. Because everyone sort of believed and worshipped like gods of like different elements and stuff. So when this event happened, all of the elements kind of were affected in different ways, which caused a lot of people to think that like the gods were angry, or this was some kind of like our world's version of like Ragnarok or something. Yeah, maybe like a Yellowstone kind of situation. So like maybe it's like you guys said, right? It's like a chain of volcanoes. Right, we've got a whole like line of them, and maybe it is like legitimately like a line, right? They're not. They obviously don't look exactly like this, but and then we could call this like the spine of the world or something, because they're like all, they kind of like give off that kind of vibe, you know? And maybe this was formed because like some kind of like continental shift, or it was like the tectonic plates kind of like slammed together and like made like these crags and like all these like big rocky formations, which eventually like turned into volcanoes. Yeah, it's kind of like a wall was created of volcanoes. And then some kind of earthquake could have happened, right? Which then set off all these fucking volcanoes, right? And it was awful, and everyone on this continent was fucked. Except for, like, maybe the people who were, like, closest to the shore. Like, maybe these guys are okay. But this is fucked. Not because necessarily it was, like, flooded with, like, lava and stuff, but, like, being really close to an erupting volcano is not great. Okay. So I like this idea. So then, if it's an elemental apocalypse, right? Let me just change the shape here so you guys can get a better understanding of what the fuck I'm doing. Dakota, you put the fucking notes on the different... Ugh. Paste that. And let me just change this to notes so I don't lose track of that anymore. So, okay. So, so let's say there was like a... let me pitch this idea to you. So there was some kind of earthquake that set off the volcanoes. Oh no. So the earthquake, that's an Earth-related apocalyptic event, right? So we'd have an earthquake. Which then sets off the volcanoes. And then we could tie in, if we tied in water and wind, then we would have like all of the religious people would be like, no, this was like a Ragnarok, the gods did this, every element fucking fought back against us and destroyed us, like we're not welcome anymore kind of vibe. And like I said, religious groups, not like everybody doesn't think that, but that's just like an idea. So technically, these things could also, an earthquake and a volcano could also affect like the oceans. And then I don't know enough about like tornadoes or hurricanes or anything to tie what we have here into that as well. But if we could somehow figure out a way to like so we'd have like an earth, a fire, a wind, and a water kind of situation. Oh yeah, the poisonous air from the ash and stuff. Yes, I like that. And then the ice and the water from the winter. Perfect. You got it. You're on the same page. So then there's like the ash. I almost wrote ashes. So there's the ash and stuff, which means like the poison air. And then everything got really fucking cold. Cold. Then things got cold. Dead Red Spread Krakatoa Explosion Modern War. Thank you. I'm glad you're here. So yeah, I think that's a good idea. What do you guys think? Wouldn't the people on either side have no idea that the other existed because the volcanoes were blocking them? I mean, I guess that we could think about that. That's definitely an option. It's like a sickness that they are trying to cure themselves from stealing body. Oh, we're talking about the body theft again. Okay. Is this the only map? Because everyone would be dead. No, this is not. No, this is not. This is just the main. Maybe this is like at the center. God damn it, Dakota. All right, merge layers. What the fuck did I do? Give me this. What do you mean I can't transform it? What's going on? Why am I not allowed to move the... What the hell am I doing? Okay. Yeah, no, we're gonna do the underground thing. Don't worry, it's coming. Alright, so we have this main setup. This is basically just our world's creation story, right? Or not creation story, but like, not for the world, but our general concept, our starting point. So this is the thing that puts everything into play. This is our apocalyptic event. So now let's add some other land masses here. Do we want there to be a bunch of other land masses, or what are we thinking? How populated do we want this to be? Is there a lot of people on our planet? Did there used to be a lot of people and now there are not? Yeah, I feel like if we're gonna go for like everyone's nomads trying to survive the winter and living underground and stuff, I feel like it would fit better that people are fairly scarce. Maybe we can populate the surface with very dangerous creatures. Because like the only thing that's up on the surface that can still survive are things that can survive the things that we ran away from, which makes them terrifying. Yeah, okay. So an earthquake caused these volcanoes to erupt, which means something was going on that would affect the general... so I guess maybe they should be like spread more... Mammoth bear fusion. That's terrifying. So we're going to go ahead and make that our main landmass. And then we'll make some other ones that look like they, a long time ago, broke off from the mainland. So maybe it's our map is more of like a, almost like Pokemon-esque, where it's just a bunch of smaller land masses, almost like islands and stuff, centered around this strange volcano chain. Okay. Let's add like a few more little islands off of this guy. And like just some smaller islands as like chunks of what used to be. Oh man, guys, I just realized that if everything gets super cold, depending on how cold we want it to be, we could freeze a lot of this, couldn't we? Except for like maybe around the equator, just so that like our planet isn't completely frozen over and just like a lawless hellscape. So maybe this is like our equator. So then we have like it's warm-ish right about there. Oh yeah, for sure. The events of the volcano affected the whole world. We can expand this later, but like this is just a general idea to get us going. Yeah, icebergs and stuff too. I do like the idea of there being a spot where it is very cold to the point that like maybe these two islands are connected by like just ice, or like this one and this one or something. Like I like the idea of people being like, yeah, there's nowhere else to go. The only people that we're aware of are like on the other continent, but we can't sail a boat. Like you'd have to get some kind of like, you'd have to ride there on some kind of skiff or something. Or like a big sled. Just a big old sled. Pulled by whatever terrifying creatures are in this world. Yeah, for sure. The people here got fucked to the point that pretty much everyone is probably dead. Like no one survived that. The ones on these locations survived, but were still affected by all of this shit that's about to happen to them. Because if it was enough to make our world frozen over, then they definitely like. If the whole ocean froze, humans wouldn't survive. I mean, they technically could. A rabbit centipede is the most terrifying thing I've ever heard of. I'm just gonna write some of these down because, like, just for later, maybe we'll do another stream at some point down the line, and we can work on this stuff again. And I'll just save this so then we can have notes for later. And we can all question what the fuck any of these ramblings mean. Maybe like the middle guys moved into the underground and found underground Athens. Potentially. Popping in and out every once in a while, and boy, is it a journey. Yeah, D&D type monster stream could be fun. Yeah. If a permanent winter happened, I don't think the whole ocean would freeze. No, it wouldn't be the entire ocean. But well, I think that would primarily be because of the salt in the water, right? It would have a lower freezing temperature than fresh water. So the ocean probably wouldn't completely freeze. But there would be icebergs, like you said. What was that other fucking terrifying thing you said? You said mammoth and bear, I think was what it was. We'll draw these later. Can we get a Discord channel where we can work on the world, make maps and creatures and maybe old ruins? Maybe I'll think about it. I do like the idea of us working together on this exclusively through the streams. Sounds like a fun thing for all the community to come together and work on. But yeah, I'll think about it. I might be able to pull that. Wolf wasps. Nothing is a bad idea right now. We're just gonna jot it all down, and we'll try and figure out a cool way to put it all together in the future. So yeah, what was the other? Okay, so before this is a really good jumping off point. But before we end, the first thing that we want to establish is this underground society. So I feel like putting it here, I'm not super crazy about the idea, just because for them to have enough time to survive all of these things that happen, they would have to have that underground stuff already fairly situated. But if it was somewhere else, they would have more time. As temperatures got colder, and as the sun was less and less visible, and how fucked and awful, like how poisonous it would be, they would have to be from one of these other locations. And we don't even really have to decide where. And we can add more land masses and like change things up a little bit. This is just a general idea. It's not. I wouldn't even say that this is like our first map. What if the people on the island were dependent on the people on the mainland? So when they went under, their society failed. Maybe. That could work. So let me jot this idea down. So we've got the underground, quote-unquote, Athens. And then... Oh, maybe they had like an old sewer system. I kind of like that idea. Okay, so we're talking like maybe like an old school like New York kind of situation where like literally, if you guys don't know about this, underneath New York City is the previous New York City, which is filled with homeless people, and it's terrifying. It's like where cryptids live, and it's like super dark, but there's like just stuff everywhere. Yeah, or like a city that got buried after the earthquake or something. Yeah, something like that could work. I like that. We'll do like, just so that I don't forget this idea when we come back to it. Old New York style. Sewer City. And what was that other thing that you guys were throwing around? You had the idea of, oh, like the earthquake, like sunk the city. I like that a lot. This is good. This is turning into some good shit right here. When we do that, when we finally do that TankRunner D&D campaign, we might play it in the world that we created together. That seems like a really cool idea. Okay, let me save really quickly. World Building 101. All right. So, I think that this is a good stopping point. We have a lot of stuff here. Oh yeah, let me just... Body theft. Repo men situation. All right. So this is a good jumping off point. We've got a lot of information here. We can think about it for a little bit, take some time to come up with some more ideas. So then the next time we do this stream, we can jump right back into this and start going into some more detail. Next time the next stream will just be exclusively this. So I know a lot of this one was just like a lot of me talking and answering questions and just talking about world building in general. But the next one will be us creating this world. We'll be diving into this heavily for probably another 3 hours or something. But for those of you that are in here and have been in here from the beginning, thank you very much. We kind of exceeded the viewership that I thought we were going to get. I said at the very beginning that I was like maybe 4 or 5. We hit like 14 in the middle there, and we held it for a while. But thank you guys for coming in and watching. For those of you watching on YouTube later on, thank you so much. Don't worry about it if you couldn't make it. Hopefully we can see you on the next one. When is the next stream? I'm not sure. I will let you guys know. I'll do another post I'll do a community post on YouTube to let you guys know it's happening, and I will also post it on the Discord. And I'll give you guys a heads up enough that you can prepare for that or set up your schedule if you want to make it out. And last question, will you be making a video out of this? Yeah, actually, this is just going to go straight onto YouTube. I am going to check and see if I can't edit some of it. There was a gap at the beginning where I was just waiting for people to come in. And then there was a gap right towards the end there where I took a little bit of a break to just get something to drink and walk the dog and stuff. So I'm going to try and cut that. But other than that, this will be going up on YouTube, so check that out. I mean, I don't know who I said that to. You guys have been here the whole time, so you don't need to watch it again. And the people who heard me say that are already watching it now. So I'm just going to stop myself before I go completely insane. Thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate it. What is the dog reveal? Soon. We'll do a dog reveal. Her name's Pancake. I will leave it at that, and you guys can just assume what she may or may not look like. Okay, thanks for watching, guys. This has been TankRunner. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye-bye!